Welcome. It's office hours. It's your boy Mike. I don't know about a guy in his late 50s saying your boy Mike, but it is what it is. This is live, and when it's live, whatever you say is what goes through, unlike an edit. Hope you guys are doing great. Welcome to the last day of the week. Happy Friday. The date today, what is it? The 19th, so it's September 19th. Have a few news stories I'd like to share with you, maybe do a little bit of AMA, Ask Me Anything. So as folks are coming on, do me a favor, let me know. Just let me know in the comments if you're here, and also how the audio sounds. I'm always kind of, I don't want to say nervous, but I'm always kind of like, I hope the audio sounds all right. It's just funny. It's never a stable thing. Been a heck of a week, especially with, what happened last on the 10th, so it's been, today's the 19th, it's been over a week now, but yeah, it's been kind of crazy. However, grateful to be here. I did a podcast episode, so last Friday I said, hey, I'll have some comments on the Charlie Kirk thing. I did a podcast over the weekend and published that. Hopefully you've had a chance to check that out. We won't talk too much about that today. However, if you are curious what my position is on all this stuff, as it continues to dominate people's minds, hearts, troubling the news cycle, etc., feel free to take a look at that. We're going to look at some other news stories today. So I've got some interesting stuff. We're going to talk about the founder of Ben and Jerry's. We're going to talk about Democrats and social media, and also, I got one other story that I want to cover today, which was exploding batteries. So we'll talk about that just now. But as people are kind of jumping in, do me a favor, say hello in the chat. Glad to have you guys along. It's going to be a good little discussion today. And as I've mentioned in the previous one last Friday, so these office hours, I've always liked doing live streams, always loved it. And it's fun from a community standpoint because you get to build, you get to build a bit of a relationship with the folks that interact with your content. I'm always grateful for that. And so what I'm going to be doing on a regular basis are these Friday live streams. Right now they're going to be on Fridays. Right now they're going to be around noon Eastern Standard. However, we'll see over time. I'll kind of experiment a little bit and find the right day and time, but I'm going to be doing these regular live streams because A, I like it, and number two, as we do things here, A and two, I think it's got some potential for good, especially if you've got questions. And so one of the reasons I title this Office Hours, like if you've got questions, you're like, hey, I'm busy doing this marketing thing. I've got this business strategy issue. I'm trying to increase sales, etc. You got this question, bring it to the live stream. Bring it to the live stream. You can throw it up there in the chat. And as I take a break from some of the commentary and news stories and back and forth, we can address those questions. So I think over time as this audience grows, which is a small audience right now, but as it grows, I think doing the live stream will be kind of cool because if you've got questions, etc., you can bring them to the live stream and we can have a little chat. Always kind of fun. All right, do me a favor. I keep saying this. Say hey in the chat if you're just showing up, seeing a few eyeballs. I don't mean that to be disrespectful to me, to Uncle Mike. You are more than just an eyeball, my friend. You are a dear friend. So thank you for being here. But let me know that you're here. Let me know how the audio sounds. I want to get into the first story here. Why not? Let's kind of jump into it because what better time than the present? So the first story I want to talk about here is this really fascinating, kind of caught my eye. But you'll see here that China is in the news again. So essentially, and there's a couple stories on this, but the story is China could make EVs explode. Cyber expert warns. What's going on here is Australia had a kind of a security conference recently. And this story is it's behind a gate. But I thought the headline was good and a little blurb. So Australia had a security meeting, I don't know what you'd call it, and there was this expert, what's his name? I think they've got him here. So millions of Chinese devices are ticking time bombs, including EVs, which could be remotely disabled or made to explode. A top cyber expert warned. We'll skip this. But this fella right here, Alistair McGibbon. And McGibbon served in the liberal government. He's been an advisor. I believe he's a consultant. He's a cybersecurity expert. And he looks like one, doesn't he? I mean, look at that face. Mr. McGibbon, very serious. Something about a bald man with a beard just tells you that you're in good hands. Would you not agree? Look at this layered over here me. There we go. So essentially, McGibbon, former cybersecurity advisor to Liberal Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, and now Chief Strategy Officer at CyberCX, told the Australian Financial Review Cyber Summit on Tuesday that the Labor government's policies towards Chinese-made EVs were inconsistent with its security priorities. And McGibbon urged public officials not to ride them. So here's what's going on. Essentially, McGibbon's saying that if you're riding in a Chinese-made electrical vehicle, an EV, electric vehicle, you've got the chance. By the way, I just got to say real quick here, we got Master Steve MC. What's up? Hello, hi. What's going on, Steve? Master Steve MC. Glad to have you along. So essentially, if you're in a Chinese-made EV, well, all these EVs, whether it's Chinese-made, American-made, Japanese-made, doesn't matter. They have massive lithium-ion batteries. And if you've paid attention to any of the news, these batteries from time to time can go sideways. They can blow up. And this is often due to overcharging or some type of faulty electrical wiring, etc. But if you've ridden in an electric vehicle, an EV, you can see how high-tech these things are. There's been discussions about, there's been complaints actually about Tesla, and essentially they can brick your vehicle if you don't pay for updates and subscriptions. The mothership has a lot of control. This is not like an old combustion engine Model T Ford where you buy it. Supposedly, I can't remember, was it my grandfather, great-grandfather? I think it was my great-grandfather. The story, I don't know if this is true or not, is that my great-grandfather bought one of Ford's original cars. It may have been a Model T, I'm not certain. Took it home, completely disassembled it because he wanted to understand how it worked, and then put it back together before he drove it around. Don't quote me on that, but that's the story I heard. Now, I don't remember if I'm conflating that in my old addled brain with another story I heard. Maybe it wasn't my relative, but you can imagine how simple those cars were. They were quite simple. So simple, a marketing guy, a business guy like me could probably fix it, not a problem. If I can replace the carburetor on my lawnmower, I'm certain I could have probably fixed a Model T Ford. But cars today, whether they're combustion or electric, are outrageously complex. I mean, cars are very complex right now. That's true for combustion cars. If you drive any, whether it's an American car, which tend to be sometimes not as sophisticated as far as tolerances and engineering, or you drive a Japanese or German car, both of which are a lot more sophisticated at times. All these cars right now have high-tech systems in them. However, the EVs take it a level further. They take it up a notch because the EVs are essentially like consumer products. They are these electric, what would you call it, appliances. They're like an appliance. You go and do your laundry, or you got a smart fridge. It's almost like a smart car. I say almost, it is a smart car. And so these consumer products, the consumer product metaphor or approach to, or the appliance approach to a vehicle is relatively new. So even when you're driving a combustion engine with a lot of electronic gadgetry, there are kill switches and so on at the mothership. There's no question. However, the electric vehicles take it to a whole nother level. They can do firmware updates remotely. It's all satellite linked. The car doesn't work without the software, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's one thing to say, well, they could use a kill switch. So if you're buying, and this is what this McGibbon is saying, that if the Australian government's buying all these Chinese vehicles, China and Australia are not necessarily good friends. China is not necessarily good friends with anybody. Even with its allies, it's not necessarily good friends. It's not easy. China's not easy to trust, and I don't mean that in a Asian people can't be trusted. China as a state, it's not necessarily interested in being friends or partners. It's just interested in what it wants. So you could be cynical and say, well, every country is like that. Welcome to It's a Tug of War. Hey, what's up? Thanks for joining. But Australia, being closer to China, I think finds China a bit of a threat. And they have this strange relationship where they have to rely on China. It's the biggest giant, superpower in its region. But Australia, and it's in the Pacific and the Asia area. And at the same time, it is also a Western nation and Western ideals, Western values, and identifies and kind of gravitates towards the Europe, the EU, America, etc. So this McGibbon, picture of him right here, this McGibbon at the recent cybersecurity thing they had in Australia said, hey, this government's got to pay attention because we're buying all kinds of Chinese cars and they have these lithium-ion batteries. And not only can China remotely shut these cars down, meaning they can shut a whole fleet down. If the government has some big contract with a Chinese auto manufacturer, and the Chinese auto manufacturers are different in the sense that they're often, like almost every Chinese business of merit is state-owned, one way or another. When you follow the money and you kind of figure out who the owners are, it's owned by the government for the most part. It's a very broad statement, but generally true. If Australia starts to flex its muscle or tells China, no, you can't do something, or we're not interested in this partnership, or fill in all the blanks, the state could shut the cars off. Shutting down, let's say the government's gonzo for green energy, which Australia is. Australia is like woke. And I know I've got some Australian friends that watch, some Australian viewers. Love you guys. But the fact of the matter is your country is a leftist country. It really is. And so let's say this leftist country is gonzo for green. We got to save the planet for the children that we're not having. We got to save the planet. So we're going to get out there and we're going to buy all these electric vehicles and we're going to get them from China because they're giving us a deal and they're our neighbors and we do a lot of trade with China. So now you got a fleet across the country of government vehicles that China can turn off like that. You're just going to boom, disable everything. Okay. But the other part of this is that the Chinese can also cause the batteries to explode. I mean, if you think about how secure and safe combustion vehicles have been, you're driving around a bomb. I mean, you got all this gasoline in a tank in your car, a bunch of non-trained idiots out there driving, etc. It's a miracle that we haven't seen more combustion engines explode. But going to battery technology does not protect you from explosion. In fact, if anything, it makes it more likely. These lithium-ion batteries are a big deal, and they blow up. They blow up. As a matter of fact, if you remember, let's see, I don't think I've got it. Where is that? All right, I thought I had an article on it open. I think it's gone right now, but I want to say back in 2022, there was a rash of Chinese scooters, little e-bikes and scooters. The batteries are blowing up in America, in India, like different countries. There was this kind of scare because Chinese e-scooters and e-bikes were blowing up. The batteries are blowing up. This was back in 2022. By the way, It's a Tug of War says, if you were asked to choose between an electric car or a regular car, which one would you choose? I would go combustion engine. Call me call me a planet murderer, if you will. I love a combustion engine. I mean, there's a lot. I've been riding actually in electric vehicles lately, and they're quite impressive. They're quiet. They've got torque. They're quick. They're very stylish, very modern. They're cool. Like I get it. They're high tech. I love combustion engines. I love the throaty, like you get into a Porsche 911 6-cylinder and it's like you get into a BMW, the throaty burble of the engine, the roar, the fire, the explosion that's happening, the controlled chaos in the motor. I just think there's something amazing about that. I find it thrilling. I've got a motorcycle. I love the exhaust sound of the motorcycle. I get the attraction of electric versus combustion, and I just there's something about combustion engines that I have a love affair with. And maybe it's my age, maybe it's just I don't know. There's an aesthetic aspect to that experience that I prefer over electric. And yeah, I understand you could create audio kind of experiences. You could simulate exhaust, etc. In an electric vehicle with the audio system. It's like, why would you do that? It's almost like saying, well, I could eat synthetic ribeye, or I can eat a ribeye like a real one. Why wouldn't I just eat the real ribeye? Well, I'll tell you why. Because the World Economic Forum won't let me. Anyway, yeah, so that's that. So what's interesting about this is the batteries can blow up. How about you? I'm curious, Tug of War, what you would choose given the choice. I got to ride in a couple this week. I went up to see a client in North Carolina, and at least two of the folks, I rode in two different electric vehicles. And then we went to visit one of their customers, and one of the key people at their customer pulled up in a brand new Cybertruck that they had just put new tires. They put some really cool rims on it. And, I did a video on the Cybertruck years ago when it first was announced, and that video did quite well. I've been intrigued with electric. I'm not hostile to it. I just don't find it as evocative as a combustion engine. But again, I was born in the late 60s. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. My first car was an 8-cylinder, 4-barrel Oldsmobile. I mean, I'm all in for the combustion. I'll be sad if during my lifetime the combustion engine goes away. I will be sad. At the same time, at my age, by the time it goes away, let's say it goes away in 20 years, it's gone. In 20 years, where am I going? I mean, so I'm going to be some old guy that needs to go to this grocery store. Probably better for me to get into a self-driving electric car. The rest of the world will be more safe if I'm not driving that vehicle. So, but that's that. So the concern here that McGibbon brings up is that China has the ability to cause these cars to detonate. Now you might say, well, this is alarmist. This is kind of crazy. This is silly. The reason that this is important to consider is if you look back at, like, say, a 9/11, if you had said to people, hey, there's a bunch of guys and they're taking flying lessons for commercial jets, but they don't really care about learning how to land the airplane, they just want to fly it. To all of us right now, anyone my age, it's obvious. It's like, oh, they're planning to crash those airplanes into buildings. That had never happened before, purposefully. I mean, maybe in the midst of World War II, the Japanese Zero, the kamikaze pilots would dive bomb and crash into something as a way to take out as much of the enemy's infrastructure and people as possible. But just in general, no one was targeting civilian in the midst of a non-hot war and going to use airplanes as a bomb, as a way to attack. Like, it didn't enter our conception of what was possible. It takes lateral thinking, diversive thinking, etc. Is it diversive? I'm not using the right, forgive me, it doesn't matter. But it takes a different kind of thinking to say, well, hang on a second. You have to start thinking about, if you look at what happened in Israel and Gaza, no one would have thought of little hang glider chairs flying over the border all the things that the Hamas did on that attack. You don't think about these things because they've never happened before. And so people like McGibbon, their job is to think about what could happen. What could happen? It's problem solving. They're just thinking about like, hey, if I were a bad guy, what are my options? Well, if you are a hostile state with interests at odds with the interests of the West, at odds with the interests of Australia, at odds with, you would think of ways that you could neutralize or eliminate opposition, resistance, or even a threat from another neighbor in your theater of operation, in your sphere of influence. And so it's an interesting discussion, this McGibbon. I'll be curious to see if this goes anywhere. It made a little bit of news just because it was kind of like, hey, whoa, hey. He said the quiet part out loud. You're not supposed to talk like that about China. It'd be interesting to see what happens with that. But as the EV world moves forward and the things that we rely on for our independence and our freedom, and don't forget, an automobile is all about agency. You have agency when you've got access to transportation. You can do a lot more when you have access to transportation, whether it's public transportation or private. Transportation allows you to do so much more, to earn more. It opens up opportunities. It adds to your quality of life, potentially, et cetera. And we're seeing all of our kind of communication capabilities, our transportation capabilities, our cognitive capabilities through AI, et cetera. This is all being kind of, the level of convenience is increasing, but the levels of autonomy are aggressively shrinking. And I don't think we're necessarily cognizant. We're not aware. It's like happening, but we're not necessarily aware. So I thought this was an interesting story. I'd be curious to know what you think of it. Master Steve MC, it's a tug of war, like the lyrics of one of Paul McCartney's songs, Face Blue Smiling. I don't know. Oh, Face Blue Smiling. I thought that was, I'm like, I don't know that Paul McCartney song. That, my friends, is an emoji showing up in the chat, just the text version. But yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are. Tug of War says, yep, Master Steve, he agrees. Yeah, I was about to ask, like, what Paul McCartney song is that? Not familiar with it. Well, moving along here, this one's a little bit, this one's a little lighter. I guess it's lighter. Ben & Jerry's co-founder, Jerry Greenfield, Jerry of Ben & Jerry, has resigned from the company, claiming the company parent, Unilever, silenced his campaigning. So here's the deal. Ben & Jerry's, if you're in the U.S., you totally know what Ben & Jerry's is. I mean, Ben & Jerry's is like, it's fantastic. I've always loved Ben & Jerry's ice cream. The New York Super Fudge Chunk, a big favorite of mine. I love the brownie. There's a fudge brownie, whatever it is. I mean, Ben & Jerry's is killer. And ever since, I mean, my wife and I, when we were first married, like I'd walk up, we're, young, poor couple renting an apartment in the city for a treat. We had no money, but every once in a while I'd walk up to, there was a Wilson Farms, like a little, what would you call that, kind of convenience store? Maybe it was a gas station too. I can't remember. Maybe just a convenience store. It doesn't matter. I'd walk up to the Wilson Farms with my $2.50 or whatever it was, and I get us a little tub of Ben & Jerry's and come home, walk home. This is obviously usually in the cold weather. And, we'd sit and share an ice cream. And it was nice. So Ben & Jerry's has been a part of my life for decades. I've been married for decades. And, I never really got into the background, but Ben & Jerry's, the two founders, Ben & Jerry, both pretty hardcore activists. I think they're homosexuals. I don't know if they're in a relationship with each other. Maybe they were at one point. I have no idea, but they were both gay. Company out of Vermont, which is kind of known for, being much more libertarian, if not leftist these days. And Ben Cohen started the company with Jerry Greenfield 47 years ago. So here we are in 2025, 47 years ago. And they sold the company back in 2000 to Unilever. So privately owned company. They may have gone public at one point. I don't remember the details around that. But in 2000, they sold the company to Unilever. And I think one of the deals with the sale was, hey, Ben & Jerry's has always been an activist company. We've always been social justice oriented. We were big on activism. So yeah, we'll sell to you for $326 million. $326 million on the caveat that you'll allow us to still be independent when it comes to our activism. Like, we want to, still do our thing. We'll make great ice cream. And they really did. They make great ice cream. They still do. But we want the ability to do our thing. And so they sold. That was in 2000. They sold for $236 million. And at least Jerry has stayed on. I'm not certain if Ben has stayed on or not, but recently, you can imagine, if this is a social justice and activist company, that they have been vocal about Russia, Ukraine. They've been vocal about Israel, Hamas, and Gaza, and the Palestinians. And both Mr. Greenfield and Mr. Cohen being Jewish, you would think, oh, well, they're very supportive of Israel. No, they're not. They're very critical of the Israeli state, very concerned about the inhabitants of Gaza, which we should all be concerned about any civilians stuck in the middle of a war or military conflict. No question there. But Jerry Greenfield wanted to be a lot more aggressive and outspoken with regard to the company's stance on Palestine, etc. So Ben Cohen posted this to X. He said, after 47 years, Jerry's made the difficult decision to step down from the company we built together. I'm sharing his words as he resigns from Ben & Jerry's. His legacy deserves to be true to our values, not silenced by Magnum Global. The reason you see Magnum Global in there is Unilever bought Ben & Jerry's, and they own the Magnum brand, Magnum ice cream bars, etc. They rolled Ben & Jerry's underneath their Magnum group, which Unilever's talking about spinning that off as an independent company, getting it out from under the Unilever umbrella. It's long. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's with a broken heart I've decided I can no longer, in good conscience, after 47 years, remain an employee of Ben & Jerry's. I am resigning from the company Ben and I started back in 1978. This is one of the hardest and most painful decisions I've ever made. It has to be hard for him. Well, how's he going to pay his bills if he doesn't have a job? There's an element of this that almost feels like I'm quitting, and I feel like everyone else should probably walk away too. If you've got a conscience, you should do like I'm doing. And you should quit. However, I'm sure the people that work the line at Ben & Jerry's didn't get a big $360 million payout or whatever it was. So here's a photo of the two guys, Jerry and Ben, back in the day. They got their little ice cream truck driving around. So here's what I want to say about this. I look at this and I'm like, here's the thing. I get it. You've got your views. And you had a company that you created and you built, and you, through that company, were promoting your views. And I'm all for that. If you build a business, you should have the freedom to use that business in ways that you see fit. Ways that are legal. They should be legal. When I say legal, I mean morally just laws. I don't mean like there's certain laws that are just like, I don't know why this law is on the books. But you should have the freedom. It's your private property. It's your wealth that you created. They're your values. And that means that people that align with what you think and you believe and with what you're paying and the kinds of jobs you're offering, they can go work for you and y'all could be happy together. That's fine. Like, I've got no problem with that. In fact, we need more of that in America. We need the freedom. Small business owners, private business owners need the freedom to be able to operate their businesses based on the values that they hold. Their values, not the values of the state, not the values of some legislative body, their own values. As long as you're not transgressing the law, as long as you're not like rounding up 4-year-olds and forcing them to work on your factory floor. Okay, we got certain laws that are moral. We're trying to protect children from dangerous machinery or having to work with side by side with adults that don't have their best interests at heart. We're trying to avoid children being taken advantage of. What a concept. That's something that we ought to revisit in other spheres of life. But as long as you're obeying the moral, just laws of our society, you should have the freedom to run your business based on the principles that you care about. Now, one of the distinctions that people don't make is that publicly traded companies are a little bit different. So if I own a factory, a little $30 million factory, and I'm a born-again Christian, then I can run my business based on those principles. No, I shouldn't penalize people that work for me that are not Christians, but I should say there's no room for anti-Christian behavior. We don't condone stealing. We don't condone gossiping about other employees. We don't condone hate towards one another. We don't condone doing shoddy work or being manipulative. These are all the basic concepts behind Western civilization that are informed by Christianity, quite frankly. If you have a problem with that, read Tom Holland's Dominion, a fantastic doorstop of a book that explains all that. But publicly traded companies are different because if I own the $30 million company, it's mine. I own it. I don't have partners. It's me. Or maybe I own it with my family, but we all share these same values. And so the people that come to work for us go, yeah, I care about that stuff too. I actually appreciate being able to work in a place that shares my values. I like that the owners think the same way I do, blah, blah, blah. But a publicly traded company is not owned by one person. In fact, you can own publicly traded companies. You can buy shares and stocks and you can invest in them and you can have a little tiny, tiny, minuscule stake, or you can amass a majority interest or a significant interest. You can get on the board as a voting member if you get enough shares in the business. Anybody can get access through the stock market to owning a public company. And so public companies behave differently. They tend to go with the zeitgeist of the day because they're publicly traded. They're owned by all kinds of entities, institutional investors, meaning some teachers union in Colorado has $1 billion sitting in their retirement fund. They can invest some of that in your publicly traded company. And Mike Gaston sitting in his bedroom on E-Trade or Robinhood or whatever can pick up a few shares in your company too. And so you get just a melange of people and entities, institutions and so on owning that business. Well, it's a little different. Whose values pervade at that point? And so publicly traded companies tend to have to be a little bit more milquetoast, a little bit more vanilla, a little bit more generic in their approach to values. On top of that, publicly traded companies tend to sell to a larger, broader audience. If I've got a little company in my town and my company, embodies the values of my community and people are coming and going from my community, if I'm in Trump land, and my company's kind of like Republican conservative, we got the American flag, we got the bald eagle, we got the guitars and the cowboy boots. Well, that's great. The people that live in my town love that. Why not? Why wouldn't I? It's kind of like that. Why would you show up to some right-wing small community and then open up your socialist communist food co-op and wear your tie-dye and be unbathed and wear your sandals and all this? Like, People do it, and then they take over the town eventually. And then the locals are pretty unhappy that they lost their town to these weirdo hippies. But it's fine to embody the values of your community. And it's fine not to. If you want to open a business and not embody the values, embrace the values of that community, you can see if there are other kinds of folks there that want to buy from you, that want to work for you. And if they come out of the woodwork, good for you. And if not, you'll be out of business. That's how the market works. So Ben & Jerry's had this thing. They built a really amazing thing that was doing hundreds of millions of dollars. It sold for 300. What did I say here? They sold for $326 million to Unilever back in 2020 or 2000. So 25 years ago, they sold out. When they sold to Unilever, they sold to a publicly traded company. And yeah, they had a deal. You're going to let us do what we want to do. If we want to do a pro-Palestine thing, if we want to do LGBTQ, whatever we want to do, we're allowed to do that. And I found myself, because Ben & Jerry's has been so kind of political, I've found myself kind of not as interested in their product. And part of it for me, just as a consumer, like I work hard for my money. You think live streaming is easy? I work hard for my money. And so I don't necessarily want to spend $6 or whatever it is for a tub of ice cream and send that off to some leftist woke agenda. I'm not interested in that. I just don't want to support it that way. And so I start looking at other products. That's how the market works. But Unilever isn't interested in social justice. Unilever is not interested in making the world right and fixing all the wrongs. It's not interested in minority niche issues. Things like LGBTQ and civil rights and voting rights and the rights of illegal aliens in a country, so on and so forth. Unilever is a publicly traded company. It's massive, and it needs to make money. That's what it does. It's in business to make money. It didn't buy Ben & Jerry's as a way to have a foot in the social justice arena. It did it to make money. I want to say, how big... So Unilever's ice cream division, I'll show you this real quick. The financial performance of Ben & Jerry's brand isn't made public, but Unilever's ice cream division, this would be the Magnum Group and all that, made 8.3 billion euros or $9.8 billion in revenue in 2024. It's spinning off its ice cream division, however, into a separate entity, which involves cutting 7,500 jobs across its brands globally. When you sell, and I'll just wrap this little segment up with this comment right here. When you own something private and you've invested your heart into it, and you've benefited financially, you've created wealth for the people, yourself, those around you that work for you, your communities that you work in, and you have these ideas and values that you hold dear, and these are like part of you. Like, my business has to be able to get involved in these advocacy issues. We got to keep fighting. We got to fight the fight. And if we can't put free Palestine on every carton of ice cream that goes out the door, then why are we even in business? If you built that, that's good for you. Good for you. But the minute that you sell that business to a publicly traded company, you are a hypocrite. I'm sorry, you're a hypocrite. I feel no sorrow, no sympathy for this man right here. I feel no sympathy. You're a clown. Jerry Greenfield, you're a clown. You can believe whatever you want to believe. You can do whatever you want to do. But at the end of the day, the minute you took that $326 million and you kept your job, making, I'm sure, millions a year on top of that, and now you're going to cry, boo-hoo, big bad Unilever won't let me stomp around like a child and throw a tantrum over some political, socioeconomic nonsense, then you're a clown. If you cared enough to have a voice, you shouldn't have sold the business. You sold out. You are the thing that you hate. You social justice clown. You're the very thing that you hate. You sit here and you criticize corporations. You criticize conservatives and Republicans. You criticize anything that's considered traditional and normal, and you promote everything that is progressive and so thoughtful. And this is the arc of history, and we're Ben and Jerry's, and I'm just going to put millions of dollars into these things, and I'm gonna feel so good about myself. And Unilever said, hey, look, we're not in that business. And quite frankly, if Unilever's thinking of selling the ice cream division, how valuable do you think Jerry's nonsense is to them? You think somebody wants to buy a problem, liabilities, and especially in the Trump era, you've got Republicans in control of the government, and you've got social conservatives ascendant culturally. You think anybody wants a hot potato business baked in there? Ben and Jerry's is part of the portfolio. You think somebody wants to buy that? Absolutely not. That's a liability. Do you agree with homosexuals like gay or others? What do you mean agree with them? Like if I'm having a conversation with somebody and they say, I think it's rather cold out here, and I notice they're homosexual, will I immediately disagree with them? Is that what you mean? I don't think it's a matter of agreeing or disagreeing. I think it has more to do with what I think is good or evil. I think it has to do with what I think is right or wrong. And I think it has to do with what leads to life and what leads to death. And there are decisions that we make, like pigging out on food. If you're going to sit and eat 4,000 calories a day of Burger King, Ben & Jerry's, potato chips, and whatnot, that's a way of living that leads to death. It doesn't lead to life. No one's going to live forever, by the way, but you'll become morbidly obese. You'll have heart failure, high blood pressure, cancer, fill in all the blanks. And it's a way to unhappiness, misery, and ultimately an early demise, most likely for most people. As far as agree, look, I'm a Christian. I follow Christ. So I go by the teachings of Scripture. I go by the historical, traditional teaching of Scripture, which says that homosexuality is not right or good. It's a sin. However, it also teaches us that we love people. I'm a sinner. I'm not homosexual, but I'm a sinner. If I were to be treated based on sinner, not sinner, I don't deserve to be treated well. I don't deserve to be treated with love and respect, etc. We're talking theoretically here. Everybody deserves to be loved and treated with respect because, number one, we bear God's image. Each one of us is created in God's image, and as such, every human being deserves a level of respect and dignity. That's just, doesn't matter, sinner, not sinner. Secondly, we're all sinners. No one is perfect. The only perfect human that ever lived was Jesus. Adam and Eve were created perfect, they fell. Jesus, perfect from beginning to end, and is the only way towards life. So the more that you orient your life around Christ, the more that you are living and alive, and the more your life deviates from Christ, His reality, His truth, His authority, and His word, the more that you are embracing death. So, do I agree? It's just an odd way to state it. I'm not criticizing you. I can't say yes or no to that, but I've been explicit. I follow the teachings, the historical teachings of the Orthodox, the historical church, and Scripture, et cetera, and I would say that no, homosexuality is not good. But I know people that are homosexual. I've had friendships with those people. I love those people. There are people in my life right now that are in that world, and I love them dearly. And I can't sit and say, well, I can't care about you. I can't love you. I can't want what's good for you. I can't want you to be happy and whole just because you do things a certain way. Look, here's the thing. You say homosexuality, there's an attraction to the same sex. Well, there are a lot of heterosexual people that behave quite deplorably with their sexuality. They're promiscuous. They're unfaithful to their spouses. They treat sex like a consumable product. That is just as wicked, by the way. So we in this modern world live quite destructive lives. If you want to ask me issue by issue what I agree with, disagree with, that's fine. but the kind of overriding blanket or underlying foundation, either way you want to think about it, it's Christ. Christ crucified, Christ risen, Christ will come again. Thank you for asking. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I appreciate the question, but that's just where I'm coming from. At the same time, if someone's not submitted to Christ, and I wrestle day to day trying to live a life crucified, picking up my cross and submitting to him. However, I'm not perfect at that. Ask my wife, she'll let you know. Graciously, because she's kind to me and she stayed with me all these years. But the fact is I'm human. But if somebody's not submitted to Christ, I still love them. I don't, look, there are people that are evil, they're wicked, they're nasty. They're aggressively trying to be destructive, to be filled with death, to be filled with hate. My heart goes out to those people, and my prayer is that they find Christ, that they become transformed and made alive. However, I also have visceral reactions to those people. But a lot of homosexual people, they're wonderful people. They're good neighbors. They're good employees, etc. And I'm not really wanting to judge somebody on that level. But unequivocally, I would say unequivocally. I think I added a syllable in there. That I take an Orthodox Christian perspective on homosexuality and marriage, etc. So thanks for asking. All right, so that's it. Jerry Greenfield made a big public splash. I'm out because I'm not allowed to do what I want to do. And my point is, well, what were you thinking when you sold to a Unilever for hundreds of millions of dollars? What did you expect? This publicly traded company. I almost get the feeling like he's quitting, hoping that others will quit, like he's leading the resistance. And it's like, sometimes you got to grow up. I had speaking of Christianity, a pastor, when we were living in South Africa, we were going to this Anglican church. His name was Stephen. And Stephen, really smart guy and gracious. He said, look, and it was a saying, he didn't make it up, but essentially, if you're young and you're not a liberal, you're heartless. Like, young people care. They should care. Hey, we should make you should be zealous we want the world to be right. There's these injustices. We got to fix them. Someone should do something about this. The adults have ruined the world. So when you're young, if you're not a liberal, you're heartless. I must have been heartless because I've always been conservative whenever I become politically kind of conscious. However, if you're older and you're a liberal, you don't have a brain. So when you're young, you don't have a heart. But when you're older and a liberal, you don't have a brain because you understand that's not the way the world works. It's not perfect. We can't fix everything. And some of the things that we see as injustices aren't as obvious once you start getting below the surface as you'd think. And some of the people that you think are the good guys are the bad guys. And some of the people that you've been sure are the bad guys are actually filled with love and kindness. And you're like, hang on a second. Things are not as I seemed. Let me start using my mind to start to understand these things. So I just thought that was great. And if you look at this man right here, this to me, and I've never met the man. Maybe I get a call from him and he sets me straight. But this is a man who is continuing to live life through the lens of kind of having a big liberal heart. We're going to fix all the injustices. This is an ideologue. This is what an ideologue looks like. He's made untold hundreds of millions. This man's a multimillionaire, if not a billionaire. And he's up for every leftist cause celeb that you can find. And yet at the same time, he's the one, along with his partner, who sold out to the big bad Unilever. And now he's taking his marbles and going home because they will not allow him to say free Palestine on ice cream cartons. I'm curious what y'all think about that. Throw me a comment down below. Excuse me, gulping. I got to work on my audio skills. Like when you take a gulp of coffee or water, you got this microphone right here. It's like not the best radio. I will admit it. I've got one more. Actually, I got two more quickies. I got a quickie here. This was put on NPR ran this piece just a few days ago on September 15th. And I found this piece kind of interesting. I don't know how old all y'all are, but I'm old enough to remember Obama crushing his election, if you will, against McCain, and it just seemed like the Democrats were the it kids. They had figured out campaigning, they figured out how to communicate. They were hip and cool with the kids. They had the technology all sorted out. And the Republicans were just these old guys. They're just these old guys, didn't seem to know anything, and with old messaging and old techniques and old technology. And it just seemed like the Obama people ran circles around the McCain camp. And so I've always, since then, thought of Democrats as being technologically savvy. And then if you think generationally, by the way, if you hear some noise, that's my dog lying next to me. She's scratching her head. I've got a collar on her, a donut, because she's been getting hot spots. I'm trying to keep her from, scratching too much, but that's that. Anyway, so I look at this article and it's like Democrats face an extinction moment as strategists push them onto new platforms. And I even think about Democrats as often being younger, although we looked at Jerry Greenfield, clearly a boomer liberal, if there ever was one. By the way, Scuttlebutt's Boutique here says, you are correct about being liberal when young. Fair enough. Hopefully I'm correct about being conservative when old, Scuttlebutt. Usually when you got to start paying taxes, although a lot of liberals are like, I'm happy to pay taxes because they're making $250,000. They got their master's degree. They got 2 incomes. Yes, we're so educated, And well, Scott and I just bought a new Land Rover, you see. Like they've cut down trees for their 6,000 square foot house. They're making $500,000 between the two of them. They've got their education. They've got every electronic device. They're killing the environment as much as they possibly can. But boy, are they upset when other people have to do it. And they don't mind paying the taxes. Oh, it's not a problem. We have an accountant that helps us shelter everything. By the way, your mic is clear, and that's really good. Thank you. I put some effort into that. I appreciate you letting me know. Anyway, I tend to think of Democrats when it comes to technology as being younger. They're the kids, like if you go to TikTok, you'll see just a raft of more liberal ideology. And so when I see this article by NPR, and NPR is known, National Public Radio, as being pretty liberal. They got defunded under the Trump administration, boo-hoo. Now they're begging for cash to keep things going. But Democrats face extinction moment. And essentially it's saying, hey, look, so this Richie Torres, he's pretty much, they're saying, oh, he's so bright, he's so young, but he's really, he's kind of an introvert. And we're telling him, if he doesn't get on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, if he's not doing short form, long form, vertical, blog posts, and then he's toast. He's got to do everything. You got to be a natural performing in front of a camera. Torres has embraced online videos because he says to succeed as a politician today, you have to master what I call the threes. He means 30-second vertical video, a 3-minute cable news hit, and 3-hour filmed podcast interview. Anyone who can master all three will excel in the new media ecosystem that has taken hold in American politics, Torres says. So essentially, what I found interesting about this, first of all, is that, okay, I'm surprised to hear that Democrats are toast if they don't figure this out. I would think that they would be more natural at it. Yes, Trump ate your lunch with getting on Joe Rogan, and Kamala wouldn't. You're right. You lost to some degree because of those kinds of things. However, I think there's more going on. And if I go back here, he's like, you get good at it or you become extinct. I mean, that's life, right? That's evolution, adapt or die. Okay, so this piece right here caught my eye. It says, Ever since President Trump was reelected in 2024, the Democratic Party, has been agonizing over what it did wrong. How did we lose? Now, as Democrats prepare for next year's critical midterm elections, they're trying to figure out not just their messaging, but how and where to reach voters. And some political analysts say Republicans are trouncing Democrats when it comes to reaching people online, especially through online videos. And I just think this is so interesting. Democrats are not nearly as good communicators as they should be on social media. This is Sivian Jacobitz, co-founder of Van Ness Creative Strategies, an agency that works to elect Democrats. A politician should be on all the available mediums where they can talk to voters, especially that's social media, TV, the newspaper, or local press. They're acting like this is some strategic insight. It's kind of a joke. Isn't that always the case when you're doing politics? But a politician should be available on all these mediums where they can talk to voters, especially social media. So many elected officials are viewing social media in the lens of an afterthought, or it's an intern's job, when it's the number one place that people are currently getting their news in America. Okay, here's what I want to say. About this. They're saying, we lost because we're not good at leveraging media. And I would say, to a degree, there's an element of this that's true. Yes. Your candidate did not show up on Joe Rogan. She would not allow for unscripted interviews. She would not show up in hostile territory. She wouldn't show up and just be interviewed by somebody that didn't necessarily like her, that wasn't going to throw her softballs or give her the questions in advance. If they couldn't control the environment, they would not be on it. That was one. But the Kamala Harris ticket had, how much money did they blow? It was like $1 billion some odd. It was just ridiculous. And Prairie Boy is punching, he's getting ahead, but Prairie Boy is 100% where I'm going. Kamala was a horrible candidate, period. Here's the thing. The Democrat Party didn't lose because they don't know how to leverage social media. Yes, you got to know how to use the tools, and the tools allow you, just like I'm doing this live stream, it allows us to build some level of relationship. It's not like we're hanging out, having tacos and beers together, but we're interacting on some level. I'm letting what little hair I have down and I'm just being myself and I'm riffing. Somebody throws me a question on homosexuality, I'm giving you an answer. Unscripted, unfiltered. I'm just saying what I think. And you know what? I'm letting the chips fall where they may. And I know it's going to offend some people and some people will agree. That's okay. I'm fine with that. But this kind of thing right here, unscripted, interaction, uncontrolled, to a degree, I mean, I have control, but uncontrolled to a degree is important. And the left has to figure that out. But the problem for the left is you have an ideology of control. All they want to do is control reality, control the messaging, control the media. And they've enjoyed this for generations. They've had control over the organs of communication. Walter Cronkite, the evening news, reporting on things like Vietnam and Richard Nixon, et cetera, newspapers, radio, all these, I mean, look at the big media. The only one that's not leftist as far as the big drive-by mainstream media is Fox News. And Fox News is pretty corporate, I gotta say. I'm not like a big Fox News fan. Just because it goes right-wing, it's a product. They're selling a product, and they're selling a product to a certain group of people. Fair enough. Hey, that's how it works. I don't have like any problem with that whatsoever. But the left has an ideology. They don't have ideas, they have ideology. This is why Charlie Kirk got murdered, because some people couldn't stand his ideas. And the ideology of the left does not have room for competing ideas. They are trying to create a utopia. That is the progressive project. They're trying to progress to a more perfect world in their mind. And the only way that you can get there is you have to strip people of their freedom, because when you let people do what they want, when you let them think what they want to think, when you let them say what they want to say, they do things that you don't like. And so for progressivism to work, you have to have more and more control. So when you get a candidate like Kamala Harris, who quite frankly was horrible, and Joe Biden before her was, I mean, that's a scandal in and of itself, that the man could string words together. They'd prop him up, juice him, I'm guessing, with some type of medication to get him at his best. And then he'd perform, but barely. And then the leftist media would just cover for him. So this idea that you've got to leverage social media, what they're really saying is we can't give up control. We have to learn how to use the levers of control more intelligently. And it was a mistake to not get on these podcasts and so on. But I think they knew, like I think Kamala's team knew she would get vivisected. She would get destroyed if she got on with a Joe Rogan or whoever. Because I don't think in the debate, the arena of ideas, that the leftist ideas were palatable. We just had 4 years of Biden. No one liked it. There were people that liked it because it wasn't Trump. That was about it. It was not good under Joe Biden. Things got really bad. The war with Russia, Ukraine. I mean, the leftist progressive wing of the American political system and the globalists, they pushed that war by wanting to pull Ukraine into NATO, which is something we promised we wouldn't do way back when. That's just one driver. We keep using Russia as our whipping boy. It's like, well, what do you expect? When you have a child that you keep telling them they're stupid, bad, not to be trusted, you wish you never had that kid. Well, what do you expect that kid's going to do? Eventually, most likely, that kid is going to say, you want stupid, bad, and nasty? I'll give you stupid, bad, and nasty. You want a bad guy? Say hello to the bad guy. So I just think the left is kidding themselves. When they sit saying that, well, we just need to get better at TikTok, 30-second videos, I think what they have to come to terms with is, number one, they have messages and ideologies that most people actually don't want. That's number one. Number two, their candidate for that election was a shipwreck. And you had a shipwreck candidate coming off of one of the biggest scandalous presidencies in the history of the country. Joe Biden was not running the country. He wasn't fit to run the country. The Democrats knew it. The media knew it. They're all coming out and admitting it now. But at the time, they knew it. They're not like, well, golly, looking back, I kind of wonder. It's like they knew, but they were carrying water and providing cover. So, and the other thing is, like in the world we live, yes, people want to get a sense for who you are. You got to be willing to talk to a Joe Rogan. And if you can't talk to a Joe Rogan, guys in their 20s and 30s and 40s are not necessarily interested in what you have to say. It just tells them there's something about you that can't be trusted. So I thought that was kind of an interesting piece. NPR, kind of bemoaning, oh my gosh, the Democrats, which is essentially us. I mean, NPR is very skews Democrat Party, no question. We got an extinction moment happening, folks. If you don't figure out how to get on these new platforms, I think you got to start fielding better candidates with better ideas, and then you've got a chance. Better candidates with better ideas. I know there's a segment of the country that wants socialism. I know there's a segment of the country that wants total federal government control. But there's a lot of us that are just sick and tired of all that stuff. Let's take a look at some of the comments here. Scuttlebutt's Boutique. I find myself not believing in the left-right paradigm. Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. Agree with you there. I mean, I understand what you're saying, like the two-party paradigm. I think left-right is a real thing. I think if you look at a continuum of political beliefs, conservatism versus progressivism or libertarianism, et cetera, I think those are legitimate lenses to look at political belief. But I get what you're saying. It's kind of like Republican, Democrat. You can make an argument for a uniparty. I'd be open to that argument. I think populism, we've got a lot of movements happening. Libertarianism, populism, conservatism, classical liberalism, socialism, progressivism, utopianism. I mean, there are all these isms. These are, various ideologies and positions, and they kind of get thrown into this left-right paradigm. I would agree with you there. And I think, absolute power absolutely corrupts. I mean, yes, okay. At the same time, that's a bit of I agree. And we need, if you're saying that in the sense that we need checks and balances, that we need ways to make sure that power isn't concentrated or invested too much one way or the other, 100%. Although this idea, the thing I don't like about that, it's almost like this, absolute power, man, it absolutely corrupts. People with moral excellence, I think, have earned the right, kind of a meritocracy, if you will, moral excellence, if you will. If you think of Plato and Socrates, the idea of these people that devoted themselves to purifying their soul through, they would say through intellectual, philosophical pursuit. I'm not necessarily saying that, but people that are devoting themselves to goodness, we're all vulnerable to corruption. We're humans. However, there are people that demonstrate an ability to lead. So if you have systemic checks and balances, as the original American system was set up, not a democracy, more of a classical republic. But if you've got kind of that republic, you've got your three powers, they're good checks and balances, they're not weaponized necessarily, then I think you have individuals that can wield a level of power and do so in a way that is just, right, and good, and brings honor to the people involved and to God. I'm even up for monarchy, like a good king. There's nothing wrong with a good king. Monarchy is not intrinsically evil. And history is replete with good kings, good queens, and replete with corrupt ones. You see this corruption everywhere. Prairie Ward Kamala was a horrible candidate. Yeah, that's true. The more media Kamala was exposed to, the worse she looked. And that's it. I mean, the reality of Kamala got exposed like a shining light on a cockroach and seeing it run away. Yeah, that's probably not a bad way to say it. And then Obama was the Facebook president. That's true. And I think for millennials, I mean, Obama really did it for millennials. But yeah, good discussion. So I say good discussion. I'm the one talking, blah, blah, blah. That's not a discussion, Mike. That's a monologue. Good monologue. I'm glad we had this monologue. But I'd like to know what you guys are thinking about. If you've got questions, etc., we're at about 7 minutes after 1 on Friday. I'll wrap up soon, but I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes if y'all like to chit-chat. If you got questions, they can be political, they can be business-oriented, etc. And over time, I'll kind of settle into more of a format approach to all this, but really enjoying doing the live stream with you. I'm glad you guys are with me. So talk to me. There's a bit of a lag, so I'm going to wait a minute or two here. I have to learn how to drink without making too much noise, because nothing worse than all those mouth noises into the microphone. Nobody likes that. Yeah, what do we got here? I had one more thing as I'm waiting for some comments to come in. I'll just share this. I thought this was kind of interesting. We don't need to really get into it, but this is what do people use ChatGPT for? And it's a graphic that was published recently. It's a little large here. I'll make it a little larger, actually, so that you can see it. But essentially, 28% of the folks use it as practical guidance, 28% for writing, 21% for seeking information, and it breaks it all down. We'll look at some of that. Almost 8% for technical help, almost 6% for multimedia, unknown, and then 4.3% for self-expression. Just that self-expression, I thought, so if you look over here, greetings and chit-chat, whoops, I thought that was interesting. So that's like opening up ChatGPT and just having a friend to talk to, 2%. Relationships and personal reflection, and then games and role play. I guess you can use ChatGPT for role play. I don't know. But going back up here, you see practical guidance, 10% for tutoring or teaching. I thought that was interesting. 8.5% for how-to advice. I do a fair amount of that. How do I do this? How do I do that? A lot of it's technical. I'm not asking it how to, make a souffle necessarily, although I guess you could, but more technical, like, hey, I've got a piece of software not doing what I want it to, or I can't find how to unsubscribe or delete this account. Where do I find that? That's pretty good for that kind of stuff. And then health, fitness, and beauty, which is interesting. And then creative ideation. I have played with it for creative ideation a little bit, which I hate to admit because I like to reserve the creativity, the brain work for myself. But I might be sitting saying, hey, I'm gassed out. I got nothing. I don't feel like trying to figure out, a topic for a video, let's say, or, and what ideas do you have for me? It'll throw some ideas, and then I'll take those and do a bunch of research and see what I come up with. So sometimes I just like to kind of, it's almost like a prompt to get you started. But I've done a little bit of that. The writing part is interesting. So edit or critique provided text. I do that a lot. Like I will write something. I never let AI write for me, but I will write something, and then I will give it the copy and say, okay, proofread this. And instead, what it likes to do is it says, here, I've rewritten it for him. Like, no. Don't you dare touch my writing, you filthy machine. My writing is sacred. However, it's often misspelled, grammatical, etc., punctuation. So I will ask it to proofread and then give me a list of recommendations, both on structure, logic, coherence, but those specific kind of proofreading things like spelling, so forth. Personal writing or communication, don't do that. Translation, interesting. Now that 4.5% use ChatGPT for translation, that's not something I've thought of. I haven't really needed to do that, I guess. And then seeking information is big for me. 21%, if you look up here, asking for specific info. I do a lot of that. I use ChatGPT as a research assistant often, and that's deeper research. I mean, the simple Google stuff is fine, but I might be reading, like currently I'm reading Dante's Divine Comedy. I'm halfway through Purgatorio. I've read it. But I might go to it and say, hey, this is called a comedy. I understand it's written in the 1300s. Why is it called a comedy? Because there's nothing funny about it. And then, ChatGPT comes back and says, okay, back in those days, humorous stuff was called a farce, farcical. And then you had tragedies where everything starts in order. There's an order to the world, but it ends in chaos. There's a tragedy. Families fall apart. Kingdoms fall apart. People die. It's like it ends chaotic. A comedy, things start more chaotic and they end cohesive and whole. There's a coming together at the end. That was the concept of a comedy. So that might be an example where I'm using, that's kind of lower level, but I'm using ChatGPT almost as a reading partner. And now it knows I'm reading Divine Comedy. I might ask it more questions. Some historical figures mentioned in there, I might ask it some questions about that historical figure and so on. So I use it a fair amount for that kind of stuff. And then you see some of these small, like programming and mathematical calculation, technical help, multimedia. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Got a question over here from Ed McBain. How's your new privateer endeavor going? Well, Ed, I put it on pause. I stopped it. I did 8 issues. So I did January through August. They were a minimum of 16 pages, often 6,500 to 8,000, 10,000 words. It was profitable from day one. However, I hit a crossroads with my business and I thought, this takes a ton of time. I really love doing it, but it's not growing fast enough. So it was profitable, but it wasn't growing. And I didn't have, between my consulting work, my content creation and so on, I didn't have the bandwidth to do what it took to grow the new privateer. I kind of launched it prematurely. My email list was around 1,500 people when I launched it, and I probably needed about 10,000 people. The math worked out, the funnel math, meaning 10,000 results in 2% of that, and then half of those, and you've got a funnel where you figure out who's going to buy. For the 1,500 that I had, those numbers worked really well. But I needed top of funnel scale, and I just didn't have the bandwidth. And I had to make a decision. Am I going to focus on my consulting work, or am I trying to get new privateer? And am I willing to take a couple years to work on it to get it to where it needed to be? The other thing about it too is it was getting a little bit too much. It was getting too tactical, and that's on me. I mean, as I tried to hone in my sales message to see what worked. I was kind of selling, I think, more of a tactical product, if you will. Here's how to do this and how to do that. That's fine. Like, that's valuable stuff. It's just not where my heart is at. So fantastic learning experience, profitable. I keep saying that. I cleared quite a few $100, nothing crazy, but I mean, I paid for all my startup costs and legal fees and printing and all that jazz, and made a few $100 in the process. But at the same time, at some point, I probably will relaunch. The new Privateer is more of a strategic piece, probably lower priced, less how-to, more about insights and strategy. But for now, I'm focused on my consulting work and on this content creation. Thanks for asking. Well, guys, that's about it. I hope you enjoyed this little chat. Thanks for being with me. Those watching after the fact, thank you as well. I love each and every one of you. I hope to see you again next Friday. And in the meantime, know that I love you, and I hope that you have a great week. I'll catch you in the next video. Cheers.